you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. And I think a lot of people think when they get into a management, they're supposed to be the all knowing. People think as leaders, they need to have this strong protective shell that they can't show their heart. They can't show what they're really all about. You got to show your heart. And, showing care and compassion starts with you being vulnerable.
Welcome to the STEM Career Coach, hosted by Donnie McClary. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, this is your guide to growing in STEM.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the STEM Career Coach. For this episode, we got Jonathan Stutz, who has recently co-authored a book last year with Eddie Pate, The Daily Practices of Inclusive Leaders, a guide to building a culture of belonging. Jonathan comes from a very illustrious background, so I'll let you dive into yourself and a little bit of an introduction, mate.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, Donnie. I was born in Toronto, Canada, considered one of the most diverse cities in the world. And at a very young age, I was 5, we moved to Atlanta, Georgia during the height of the civil rights movement. That was pretty impactful for me as a little kid growing up in the South, in the Deep South during the height of the civil rights movement. I saw discrimination, hate, anti-Semitism, racism, really saw it all as a kid. And it was a tumultuous time in the South. And so it really impacted me because my home life was very different. My parents were liberal, Jewish, and carried values of what's called tikkun olam, which is a philosophy of repair the world. It means when you come into this world, you have a responsibility to make it a better place before you leave.
Absolutely.
And my mom worked in the inner city schools of Atlanta that were highly segregated and helped young black kids learn how to read. We just had strong values and around social equity, social justice, and that affected me. And fast forward till I was probably in my mid 30s, I was in sales in Seattle. We moved to Seattle after my parents got divorced, and I was in sales working for a company that was helping other companies hire employees, kind of a staffing firm.
All right,
and,
here we go.
Yeah, they were asking me to help them diversify their workforce because they were federal contractors. They had an obligation to increase the diversity of their workforce. So this kind of lit a spark inside me, a pilot light that had been going since my childhood. And I didn't really, understand what this was all about, but I investigated, I researched it, and I found out that a lot of my other customers were dealing with the same issues. So I created something called the East Side Diversity Task Force, which was connecting HR and recruiters on the east side of Seattle, which was more homogeneous, to Seattle-based, community-based organizations that had really a very rich diversity. And that organization was very successful, and Microsoft saw it. They recruited me out of there to become a diversity outreach strategist. That led to a 19-year career at Microsoft. I was on their very first diversity team back in the mid-90s. And it kind of took off from there. It was pretty fantastic. It changed my life. I found my life's purpose and passion. I went on to manage a team that was responsible for ensuring the products were politically and culturally appropriate in different markets around the world. And eventually ended up at Amazon later in my career, spent 5 years there managing and leading diversity for 4 different global teams across that organization. So it's been a really fun journey. And then last year, as you know, and you mentioned, we wrote the book to really bring all that experience and to practical application that folks who are really committed to creating inclusive cultures where everybody feels they belong and make it easy for them, little intentional, easy actions. So yeah, that's kind of my story in 5 minutes.
Wow. Well, it's great to hear that this was an area of focus in the 90s, especially around DEI and creative, inclusive, cultures. And I'm not surprised, Microsoft has been at the forefront of that for quite some time, in a lot of different areas, especially on the technology side of things as well. So it's great to see that, you turned something that you were passionate about, that you saw, as you were growing up, and it somehow shaped exactly where you are today. Now, one of my favorite questions to ask, especially authors, is what, I guess, prompted you to write the book? It's a quite lengthy process. It's not for the faint of heart, for sure. What, I guess, put you and Eddie together to, essentially put this pen to paper?
So I had gone back to school and did a master's degree. I guess it was in 2013 I finished on organizational leadership. And my master's thesis was the yellow brick road of leadership. And it took the concepts of the Wizard of Oz, of heart, courage, brains, and a vision for creating a shared, a vision for where we want to get to, a goal. In the concept those are really key leadership skills. Heart is having compassion and care for people, so critical in leaders, to show vulnerability, to be empathetic. And then courage, the willingness to act, to speak up. And then also wisdom, which is this experience and knowledge combined. And that really became, for me, the purpose of writing the book. I felt like there was the bones of a book in that master's thesis.
Mhm.
And then Eddie and I had worked together at Microsoft. We didn't know each other really well, but then when we were starting up this, he was starting up this new operations group at Amazon that was really supporting over 1 million employees eventually for
Oh, wow.
diversity work. And I came onto that team. I think it was his third hire, and we built out a team of about 20 folks. And we talked about, once we left Amazon, that we both wanted to write. And I was kind of stuck after I left Amazon. I couldn't find the discipline actually to sit down and do this work, to write it. And so I called him and I said, I'm kind of flailing a little bit. What do you think about doing this together? And he said, I'm also struggling to sit down and
Oh,
have the discipline to
fantastic.
write. So we connected with a friend of mine who'd written 3 books on customer service, Bill Price. And Bill put us in touch with Barrett Kohler, the publisher, was one of his publishers for one of his most recent books. The magic happened. They were excited about our topic. Eddie had been for 25 years developing this model, the 7 Insights of Inclusive Leadership. That's the wisdom chapter. And so we took that wisdom chapter, which was kind of the nuts and bolts of what he'd been doing for 25 years in developing the 7 Insights of Inclusive Leadership, put it together with my, heart, courage, and wisdom, brains, and we built a book out. It's been really successful. We're really having fun with it.
I mean, it's you never work a day in your life if you're enjoying what you do, as they say. But I love that you cross paths, and then eventually you both are actually at the same point, and then reached out to each other, and then
Yeah.
here we are. Fast forward to last year, where you released your book, and now as you mentioned, it's been quite well received, which I'm really excited to read it myself. From what we know about your book, it focuses on daily practices. I would love to know maybe one small action leaders could take today to build inclusion into their routine.
I think so much about inclusive leadership is this one-to-one relationship with the people that work for you.
Mhm.
And so I think, having a regular one-on-one on your calendar scheduled with your employees, either 30 minutes once a week or 45 minutes every 2 weeks, and sitting down and really getting to know them at a deeper level, not just what's on their resume, and what the job description says of what they're supposed to do and what they bring to the table, but more about them on a personal level. What are their goals, their aspirations? What are their experiences? How are you doing? Being vulnerable and asking how you're doing and getting feedback so you could be like the best manager they've ever had. And
Mhm.
I think that connection is one little thing you can do, is just having that on the calendar on a regular basis to connect with people and get to know them, so that they know that when they're in meetings and when they're out there working for you on your team, they know you have a connection, that you've got their back, they've got your back, and you've shown that personal interest in helping them achieve their goals. I think that's a huge thing, but it's a little thing that you could do so easily, right?
For sure. It's funny you mentioned that, because something that I do as I've grown into leadership is I like to get a professional goal and a personal goal. I know you're a boss, but what you do during the day really is to drive what you do on the personal side of things. Um, you know,
Absolutely.
and I also feel like when those are linked up, you kind of, don't see the line between the two. You kind of see them as, one big goal. If you want to be promoted, it's usually to, either grow your family, buy your first home or a car, trips. We have a lot of it as themes in my, my team. But I always felt that you can't fake genuine care, and if you care about someone, the more you know about someone, the more you're gonna, try and put your, best foot forward. We're people, we are human, we have bad days like everyone else, but we try to mitigate those as much as possible. And if you genuinely care about someone, I feel that you always think twice before acting, and always making sure you're putting your best foot forward, just from my experience.
Absolutely. And, you just reminded me of a manager that I had. And I've been very fortunate to have some great managers and mentors that have became kind of informal mentors just through that great connection we had with each other.
Mm.
And there was a guy, the first manager, the guy who hired me into Microsoft, his name's Randy Massengale. And Randy, we would sit in the car on a flight going to, a different conference or meeting, and we would talk, and he would counsel me, coach me, and to make sure that, because Microsoft was such an intense work environment and it just could consume you, you know, he
Okay.
called it your mistress, that it was just, you were all consumed with it. And he said, like, make sure that you're reading outside of work. What are you reading? He would literally, on our
Mhm.
first trip, my first week there, we were on a flight, and he had me read a book, on the flight. He was like adamant. It was like almost parental. Like, you had to sit there and read that book on that flight. And then, he would say, what are you reading? He'd say, are you working out? Are you getting out for your workouts? Let's go to the club. There was a club associated with the Microsoft, relationship. And so we'd go to the club and work out. He'd say, are you taking care of Stacy, my wife? And are you, make sure that you're spending time with her, and
I love that.
she's happy with how much you're spending time with her. Just very holistic approach to my life, and would check in with me on how am I doing? What did I need? Because it was a very grueling, experience there. And that has stayed with me my whole career. And I passed that on. We call it in our book that you'll read, dropping pebbles. There are little things that you do inspire other people to drop pebbles. And that's how you get this effect of the pebbles turn to ripples, the ripple turn to waves. And that's how you change culture. By modeling that leadership behavior, I modeled it with the people that I led. And I became a better leader because of the pebbles he dropped and how he inspired me to take care of the people that I worked for. That was such an important part of being building a strong team, really. Building a high performance team was that connection with your people and taking care of them.
Passing it forward is very important. And it's not just the bad stuff. Leaders, as they say in the army, so pardon my French, shit rolls downhill. You get
Yeah.
yelled, they get yelled at, and it's just a domino effect. But in my opinion, good leaders kind of stop it. Okay, all right, I got yelled at. That doesn't mean I need to turn around and yell at everyone around me. I think there's a better way to do this. Digest it, take the points, and then, okay, run and, get everyone, rally the troops, as they say in the army.
Leaders should provide umbrellas.
Absolutely.
Don't let stuff hit your employees. Filter it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about, graceful conviction in navigating uncomfortable topics. Can you share a moment, where you approach, made a difference? Because, as a leader myself, I'm very excited to hear this, because we do have difficult discussions. People do things wrong, and how we, navigate those uncomfortable topics, I think would be helpful to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. In the book, we call it this concept of calling in versus calling out.
Mm-mm.
And the mechanism to use that is something we also talk about in the book called the pause button. You want to create a cultural norm where people in a meeting, when we're just in this go, go, go environment, everything's moving fast, we're trying to get through agendas, take care of business, make decisions. But oftentimes when we're talking about personnel decisions or how people are affecting other people in the room, your intent might be good, but you could really, impact somebody negative with a derogatory statement or
Mhm.
offend them, something that's insulting, accidentally. Your intentions are good, but it's like stepping on a toe. I didn't mean to do it, but it
So
still
second.
hurt.
Yeah.
And you need to be accountable. So this idea of hitting the pause button is actually saying, I'm going to hit the pause button, and everybody in the room knows that means we're going to hold on a second. We're going to talk about what just went down and deal with it right then and there. We're going to think more, thoughtfully and carefully about what decisions we're making or how people are affected by things. Whether like somebody gets interrupted in a meeting, women get interrupted much more frequently than men in meetings. So when somebody gets interrupted, it's to say, hey, hold on a second. I'm going to hit the pause button. Brittany wasn't done speaking. Let's let her finish, and then we'll come back to you, Donnie, and let you have what you have to say. So that people, again, dropping a pebble and saying, that's not how we behave in meetings. We don't interrupt people. So that's that graceful conviction of showing care, being, you're not going to let it go. Your conviction of creating an inclusive environment means you're going to do it in a way where you can call people in. You
Mm.
can do it in a thoughtful, diplomatic way to educate somebody, but also send the message that this isn't how we do it. And then there are times when you need to call somebody out, which is when somebody does something so offensive, so inappropriate, that you need to send a strong message that, hey, we don't do that here. That's not consistent with our values. That's not how we operate. And not only does that person get the message, but everybody in the room gets it. And again, when they go into their next meeting, they're inspired to use that calling in, calling out, and there's a judgment in there which you use in which situations. But it's really critical to slow down and think more thoughtfully about whether it's promotion decisions or who's going to be on the bench program, the high potential employee program, mentoring programs, who's getting
Mhm.
raises. Are we doing that equitably? So yeah, that's those are a few examples for you.
I like the calling in one, especially, and just a little bit of a personal example, as you mentioned, interrupting people. Um, for myself, I have a ton of energy, and my brain works very quickly. It's just nonstop. And, sometimes when I have a thought, my impulse is to, speak. And I realized that I had a very horrible habit of interrupting people before they are finished. And it was something that I had to really, and it wasn't until someone mentioned it to me that I actually even notice it, because we're kind of
Mm,
stuck in one way of doing things constantly. And, some of those, I think those calling in moments could also be great introspection because, we are human. We don't really realize how we are to people because we're too busy acting and being ourselves. So, that was something that really changed me. And as you probably see, sometimes I write notes when you say something and I'm just trying to, make little notes and make sure that I kind of keep my train of thought and then wait patiently for when it's my turn to speak. And then from there, and it wasn't something I was doing maliciously, or like you said, I stubbed the toe, but it still didn't hurt the fact that I interrupted someone and, kind of, got in the way of what they were trying to do. And that just resonated with me a little bit because it was something I used as, okay, I do this. Now, how do I stop myself from doing it? Because it's not my intent to be rude or, be someone that, wants to speak all the time. But it's also about knowing people around you and, and helping them, kind of see things they don't see. I like calling in because calling out has a very, I wouldn't say a negative connotation, but it does have a little bit of a more seriousness aspect to it, where I think the calling inside is just like, hey, mate, I don't know if you realize you do this, but, when people are speaking, you might, sometimes, not let them finish. And, sometimes that could be the greatest advice you ever give someone, especially if they want to be a leader one day or just want to be a good employee or, a colleague. So I thought I'd share that example, as I think the calling in could also be used as a little bit of a self temperature check, because a lot of people don't realize how they're doing things, until someone mentions it to them.
yeah, I'm a lot like you that way, Donnie. I get so much energy going, and I get so excited. I can't. It's just like impossible for me to hold it in, and I just got to talk. And so that
I
technique
know.
of writing it down, I've done that too, so that I just wait my turn, having the humility to let somebody have their space, and for me to let them talk and just listen instead of feeling like I need to jump in. It's a human, it's our nature, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I like the also the read phrasing, that type of aspect, because, just being a mentor, calling in someone is just say, hey, I saw this. I don't know if you realize this, that level of care, and it comes from a good perspective, can really be a great, enabler, especially in a culture and just what you're trying to create. Because it's not just one person that creates a culture. As I say a lot, it's not just the head of department. It's not the manager. It is everyone else except for that person, literally. They create everything that's going on. They create what's everyone is happening. So for me, I adopt that one, and I'm glad that I'm at least doing something right.
Yeah, for
Never
sure.
know. Now I'm curious, what's a common misconception about diversity efforts that your book helps correct? Because there are a ton of misconceptions around diversity. So I would love for you to dive into a few. You don't just have to have one.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is such a crazy time. You were talking about you were excited that I was doing this work in the '90s because we were really off the radar, and you know it was something we had to educate people about. Like, this is a business issue. It's a business strategy. This is how to create high performance teams. This is how to create highly creative teams that drive innovation, because you're bringing in people from different perspectives and experiences that add so much richness to the workforce to solve these really tough problems, like artificial intelligence we're dealing with now. And it was, and for a long time, and still to this day, security and cybersecurity and privacy, data privacy, and now climate change. I mean, there's just always tough problems, and we need really diverse creative teams. So the misconceptions are, and this is so crazy out there right now, because it's this the whole narrative around DEI has been hijacked, and it's really a false narrative. It's always been around creating high performance teams, highly effective teams, but while recognizing that not everybody has the same experience in a company. If you're coming from a culture that's historically underestimated, historically marginalized or oppressed, you're not having the same experience as somebody who's from the dominant culture. In
For
the
sure.
US and Canada, North America, it's white and male predominantly. Everybody else is probably experiencing some level of bias, stereotypes, and microaggressions and micro insults. So leaders need to respect and understand that. What the narrative, the false narrative that's out there today, this kind of a misunderstanding, if you will, is that it's something where we're going to hire somebody because they're black because we need more black people, or we're going to hire somebody because they're gay or disabled, or we have to fill it out. And that's never what it's been about. It's been about creating access. It's about building relationships and communities where the typical dominant culture doesn't spend time with people different from themselves. Most people spend time with people like themselves. So you have to be very intentional when you're recruiting to cast the nets wide and to build relationships with, if it's a professional role, professional technical organizations that focus on women, people of color, people with disabilities, the gay community, so that they apply for those jobs. They feel that this is going to be a company that's inclusive, that they're going to feel welcome and belong. And then they're competing for the job. They're competing just like everybody else. You always want to hire the best person for the job. You always want to hire based on knowledge, skills, and abilities, or what people call merit. But you want to get access so people have the opportunity to compete. So that's the huge misconception is that it's not a zero-sum game. Everybody wins when we have a diverse workforce.
I also love that you harp on the responsibilities of recruiters and recruitment professionals because, we consciously or unconsciously as recruiters have our own biases. And if we are always looking for people like ourselves, if we are always looking for people that, maybe are the status quo, then we are not helping companies as much as we really can. One thing that's really kept me in this career, as long as it has, it is not the easiest or for the faint of heart in sales and recruitment, but it is about taking care of people. I've been working technology for the past almost 8 years ish. And I found it very shocking at the difference between genders in technology. And it was something I saw that was very evident. And it was something I always wanted to be a part of. I've always wanted to help people. And I always partnered with people from all walks of life, all sexual orientations, and represent them for roles. And it was something I was always very passionate about because I feel that the more visibility they get, the better. And, there's a lot of value in being different. There's a lot of value. And most importantly, I think, the best teams I've ever been a part of had people from all walks of life and they mutually respected each other. And some of the greatest things I've ever been able to do have come from that. And it's my
Mhm.
responsibility as an HR professional. I'm still recruitment is still an HR professional, in my opinion,
Sure,
but,
absolutely.
make sure that we are speaking to everyone and whoever's
Mhm.
applying and finding the best people in those corners or little companies that we find them in and bringing them to the forefront and actively sending them to multiple companies, not just the one that you're recruiting for. And it's so great to hear that, you're dispelling some of the misconceptions and also mentioning the important role in recruitment companies or recruiters have in, facilitating this. We're a huge ally.
Well, and recognizing that it's not a transactional relationship, recruiters are under so much pressure to fill open roles, and it can be easily default to a transactional, short-term thinking and relationship. And the key thing with diversity is you have to build trust in those communities that that they've dealt with discrimination and they're very rightly so very concerned about how they're going to be treated. Are they going to be welcome? Are they going to be the only black person or the only woman on the team or the only gay person on the team? You want to come into a place where you see people like yourself and you feel connection. So recruiters who can spend the time to invest in the long term thinking of actually working with groups, there's local chapters national organizations in the US. There's like the Black MBAs Association, there's the Asian Accountants Association, there's Women in Technology International.
I'm a
There's
part of
this.
that one, actually.
Okay, all right, awesome. So, hosting their meetings, offering speakers, sponsoring events, just going and listening and spending time in their social happy hours, just to getting to know people and not there to sell. I mean, you're thinking long term. I want to build trust so that they want to come work with me. but they got to get to know you too at a deeper level so they trust you. So that's, I think, for diversity recruiting specifically, recruiting folks that aren't part of the dominant culture, as you said, the status quo. That's key, is really investing in the long term and building those trusted relationships.
And it feels good while you do it as well, which doesn't hurt.
Yeah, it's fun. You're
In
meeting
my
new people.
mix.
Yeah, it's a lot
Uh,
more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my experience, typically when you're able to align, business goals with, initiatives, it usually pans out the best. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how do you align D&I learning programs with those business goals and performance gaps to really ensure that you get the buy-in that is necessary?
Yeah. It's interesting. I'll just call you in on that question because really there's an inherent difficulty in even the question, because it's assuming that diversity is in a box over here and the business goals are over here. And really diversity is as important as the financial, the operation, the HR. It's got to be woven into the fabric of the company. And we talk in the book about most people who are kind of gone through business classes familiar with the idea of SMART goals. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. We call it SMARTY goals. And so that as you're setting goals for your organization, you want to make sure they're also inclusive and equitable. The I
Mhm.
and the top of the
Absolutely.
SMART.
I love it.
So really, I mean, it's a little whimsical, but at the same time, it's really true that you want diversity woven in. Like if you're doing privacy training, you want to look at it through the lens of how do we make sure that everybody is watching it, feels connected. Even in writing job descriptions, if you're a recruiter,
Correct.
making sure they're gender neutral job descriptions, all sorts of things. That you can do to make sure that even your policies and processes and structure around interview loops. You want to make sure the panel of interviewers has that diversity, so you get that good debate and discussion about the candidates. And then what happens on the other side? The candidates are seeing that diversity. They're realizing this company values that. It's important. And I'm seeing people who look like me interviewing me that make me feel like this is a place I fit in. So it's really part of the business. And, especially if you think about customer service, right? And how you're, in different cultures around the world, how you treat people, how you interact has got to be culturally relevant. So that's a huge business issue. And that's a major part of cultural competency is one of the 7 insights of inclusive leadership. So absolutely, it's a business issue, and it should be right at the table, not only at the table, but being heard about what's important there from the standpoint of building it into the business goals and challenges that the company's facing, organizations facing.
Absolutely. And I think transparency is very key in these types of scenarios because everyone's on a different journey. Some company might realize that, let's say, their CEO grabs your book, realizes that maybe the startup that he's building that he's so proud of isn't the most inclusive organization. He sees a lot of people like him all around him or her all around them. And then from there, they would like to make some changes. And I think, being honest with people and just saying, hey, this company has seen that they really want to make a lot of emphasis on D&I and really build a more inclusive culture. You are actually one of the pioneers for this. Don't, just pull off the Band-Aid in my experience. If that is the case, then that is, a different conversation you need to have and also a different type of preparedness that that candidate would have. They aren't going to be shocked when they don't see someone like them because they know that this is something that they're working on, opposed to you selling a company as the most, inclusive organization you've ever worked for. And then every interviewer is nothing like you and you feel like a little bit like what is actually happening here. So I feel like that
Right.
conversation and I guess understanding, where they're at in the journey. And then of course, moving that on the recruitment side, which I can't help but do, I think would really help because not everyone is where they want to be. And being a part of something and helping build something is sometimes even more exciting than being a part of a place that already has everything sorted out.
Yeah, and you can do that through your metrics. You can share your company demographics on your website, maybe internally initially, and then once you start, having some feeling like you're in a position where you can really talk about what your program is about, what you're doing, some of the substantive things you're doing, not just performative. you can share metrics and then show improvement over time. So people get a realistic purview about the organization, and even like letting them go to lunch with somebody who maybe comes from the same cultural background, ethnic background, race, to ask, have the ask the open questions and be really transparent of what's it like working here, what's been your experience, and so they can get a realistic purview of the organization. That helps a lot.
Yeah, I could imagine. And especially just on your journey, and being the new kid isn't easy. Never. And just having a few peers, a few people you can, get on with, a few friends, a few mates, to start, I think is a very great way to show the family aspect of, your business and really keeping people long term, because turnover is
Yep.
always the killer in businesses.
When I joined, I'd been at Microsoft, I think about 8 years. I joined a new team, and the first thing they did was they assigned me a buddy. It was a product team. I hadn't worked in a product group before. They were legitimately nervous how I was going to do. Am I going to be able to pick it up? And they gave me somebody I could ask questions on the side to before I went into meetings or after meetings. So I wasn't asking, dumb. There are no dumb questions, but you want to. Sometimes you're intimidated, so you want somebody you can go to, you can confide in, and whiteboard something so you really understand what's going on. And I've had that when I came to Amazon. I worked in a financial team initially, and I would sit down with people and they would help me understand the financial models and take the time. So it just helps. That buddy system is huge in helping people feel that they have their head above water.
Absolutely. And we need them to breathe while they're at work. So last
Important.
question from myself, but what are some nuggets that you would, kind of drop, or some pebbles, shall we call it, that for future leaders that are trying to, be more inclusive, be more maybe honest and forthcoming with, how they view things as well? What would be a few bits that maybe you would give them?
I think that we talk in the book about lead with your ears, and this idea of listening and asking questions. And, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. And I think a lot of people think when they get into a management, they're supposed to be the all knowing. And it's just not true. You've been in that position. A lot of times they will promote folks because of their technical capabilities, and then they've got to learn the people management
Mm.
skills. A lot of that is about, again, I talked earlier about connecting with your people, but a lot of it's listening, asking questions. One of my clients, Costco, talks about the importance of curiosity and being curious and asking lots of questions and listening and learning and asking for help. And so that's another one that's huge, is vulnerability. People think as leaders, they need to have this strong protective shell that they can't show their heart. They can't show what they're really all about. And that's kind of the Tin Man idea, that you're at this rock hard shell, but you got to show your heart. And showing care and compassion starts with you being vulnerable. And none of us can be 100% at work every day. We all have stuff going on outside of work. You talked about that, having personal goals and professional goals. So what's going on in your your personal goals? What are you struggling with? What issues? What help do you need? How can I support you? And babies are being born, parents are getting sick, people get tickets on the way to work.
Life.
Divorces happen. People cannot be at 100% every day at work. And so having a leader that understands that and can show their humanity and talk about what's going on in their life. And when you do that, people will say, wow, they're willing to be vulnerable with me. I feel like I'm safe to say what's going on in my life with them, so that they'll show empathy. I know they're going to be empathetic to me. And that creates that connection of, like one of my managers talked about, family is everything. And so if you've got a family situation, we drop work. I'll help somebody help pick up your work. I'll help you. I'll cover for you. I mean, that just goes miles or kilometers, depending where you are in the world, that,
Yes,
you just have to be willing to, that generates loyalty and commitment, and they'll work harder and be more creative, and they'll make you more successful if you take care of them. Right. So that's a huge thing for new leaders, is being vulnerable and being a really good listener.
Absolutely. And just one thing, that kind of resonated with what you said as well. It's okay. It is completely fine to ask if people are okay. If you notice that there is a change, if you notice that someone is, maybe not themselves that day, it is so powerful. Just say, hey, are you doing all right? And that's it, just that someone notices or that it takes a second to realize that maybe they're not their same selves can really help and open up hopefully a discussion, but most importantly, that they have people around them that care. And just knowing that you have
So
people around you that care can help, I think.
this is a great question. I mean, you didn't word it as a question, but I'm going to take it as a question. So the thing there is that I'll say is that if you ask somebody if you're okay, everybody does the same thing. Oh, I'm fine. What you need to do as a leader is to say, are you okay? And then they'll say, I'm fine. And then say, no, are you really okay? And then don't say anything and count to 7. Literally in your mind, count to 7 and wait, because that silence, they'll open up and then they'll tell you what's really going on. Because most people are not going to feel comfortable sharing. But if you say, no, 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 I really want to know what's really going on, and look them in the eye and you lean in and show that care, and then just be quiet and let them talk and don't say anything. Even it could be uncomfortable. It could go 10 seconds. That's a long time,
For
but
sure.
they will eventually talk to you. And that's going to go, you're going to really be able to help them. You've got to really be willing to not try and solve the problem sometimes. Then you get into that whole thing about, am I trying to solve the problem or I'm trying to listen? And most of us want to solve problems, but listening is so huge to helping your people connect.
Absolutely. And I really am glad you took it as a question, because you're absolutely right. It is something that is uncomfortable for people. Usually it takes a few opportunities, but once they get that you are genuine, it's not just a robotic response. I do feel that, you'll be able to, help, just talking about something usually helps people at the very least. And then most importantly, then they can have a little bit more peace of mind throughout the day. And Jonathan, it has been such a great conversation with you. I am really excited to read The Daily Practices of Inclusive Leaders, a guide to building a culture of belonging, so that I can take some of those pebbles from you, some of those check-ins and check-outs, and really, add a few tools to my toolkit. We all have a great leader inside of us, and the more information we get, the more we're building our perfect equation for leadership. Our culture and ourselves will probably be in a much better state for it. Thank you so much for your time, mate.
Oh, Donnie, thanks for having me on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you for listening to the STEM Career Coach with Donnie McClary. If you enjoyed today's episode, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more inspiring stories and actionable tips. Catch you next time.